Okay, this is going to be a quick gear showcase as well as me explaining what things can be upgraded and what things can still be worked on and why I chose certain gear pieces. So Cost Priest Malice, very standard for cast on crit builds, definitely need it. I'm probably going to get one with additional projectiles and Ellie Pen. It's probably going to break the bank at around 60x, but for the most part, you just want a good balance of attack speed and trigger rate. If your attack speed's too high, then you're gonna end up with a pretty inefficient setup for casting crit. It's not that big of a deal, but it's something just to be mindful of. The enchant, you should probably get LE damage or accuracy, depending on where you're hurting more. I have gloves with accuracy, so I didn't really need it. The gem setup is Creeping Frost and Frost Bomb. Frost Bomb really just to help with boss regen, especially when Maven decides to give them vitality. And Creeping Frost is just nice to have for overall damage, helps freeze, helps chill. And this is just for extra power charge generation. For the helmet, I don't have a Blizzard Crown with the enchant yet. Ideally, I would get an elevated minus cold res as well as a decent maximum power charges. If it's elevated, it's nice, but it's not necessary. It's just better for boss damage because you get all the damage at once. Having as much ES on this as possible is good, but with a Blizzard Crown, you're probably not going to have as much, which is fine, because at that point, you're dealing so much damage anyways. I have a Vortex setup with Bone Chill, Frostbite, Awaken Hex Touch, making hexproof maps a little bit better, and Frostbite is our second curse, and yeah. The Prism Guardian is necessary for most low-life builds. You can get a +2 auras one, which boosts damage by a little bit, about 2 to 3% for my build, but I didn't find it was worth it compared to the price. And I also kind of need the reses if I'm going to switch anything around. I'm running Zealotry, Grace, and Hatred in these slots for a little bit of defense and offensive mix. As far as the boots go, I have Anonymous Discipline, so just a bunch more auras in here, Herald Device, Skitterbots, and Anomalous Precision, so I can reserve it as well. I wanted Pierce and Tailwind in these, as well as cooldown recovery rate, so I could get more procs of Ice Spear. And realistically, I'm not sure if the Pierce here is all that necessary because I have so much of it already. But it was kind of on the boots that I found at the time, and these were pretty cheap, so I had to go for it. Jewelry is pretty standard. We have a Presence of Chayula. I'm allocating Essence Sap because the Mana Leech is really hard to get on jewels without giving up damage. So, and this node is also pretty far on the tree, so it's not really worth pathing to at all. The ring I would prefer if this was on an opal base and it had some ES on it, but it's really more just a placeholder. The more important thing is the Assassin Spark trigger, which is our primary curse that we'll be utilizing, as well as the non-channeling skills mana cost, which is big for cast on crit now because everything costs mana to trigger. And next, I have the Circle of Fear ring. It's hold damage with Herald Device as well as buff effect. So it's just really giving us a crap ton of damage. The nice thing about this ring as well is that it gives us dexterity, which this build kind of starves out due to the high cost of cost freeze. Realistically, you could get some really nice implicits for this, but it's not really worth it if you're spending, upwards of 50 to 100x for that little extra. But there are some really nice things, quality of life implicits that could potentially make it easier to get other items in your build, so I would be mindful of that. As for the gloves, I'm just running a standard glove that has the hits against chilled enemies for extra damage. I needed accuracy, so I decided to get it on my gloves, more dexterity, and as much ES as I can manage. Realistically, I would want a bit more, probably like 120 base ES, but this is going to have to do for now. The belt I have is from an old build, actually, my Bane build, but it's just as much ES as I could fit on it, and it also happened to have Aspect of the Spider, which is what I also wanted to use for this build. Build reses, the armor is kind of a dead stat for this build, but it's okay. Lastly, the +2 shabs that I got, really crappy rolls, but it's okay. You can obviously go for a +3 here, it's like a 9% DPS boost for me. I'm running Anomalous Ice Spear, so that's my extra source of Pierce, which is really nice for clear. Cyclone, this can be Divergent Cyclone from our move speed, which is one of my planned upgrades. Divergent Inspiration. Awaken Cast on Crit is a huge upgrade compared to normal Cast on Crit. I would highly recommend doing this over anything else in the build if you're already building it, or if you're gonna build it yourself, make sure you get this. Awaken added cold damage is interesting because you can swap it out for LE Focus. But that being said, you won't be able to freeze with Ice Spear, and I found that to be pretty jank. I don't like dying in maps, so freezing stuff definitely helps with that. I would highly recommend this over LE Focus, even if you lose out at around like 7% PS. Awaken GMP for extra projectiles, pretty obvious. Flasks are overall not that flexible. You definitely want Bottled Faith for this build. Um, Quicksilver Diamond for more crit. Dying Sun's really powerful. You can make a case for Wise Oak if you have balance or whatever, but it's just not as much damage, and the additional projectiles are just really strong. The Aziri's Promise is what I'm running instead of Cinder Swallows. Some people can run Cinder Swallow if they have a much higher trigger rate compared to their attack speed. But that being said, for me, I already have a kind of messed up trigger rate, so having Cinder Swallow would just get my damage even more. Plus, this is kind of nice for Chaos Res. As far as jewels go, the main thing you should look at is large clusters. So with the large cluster jewels, you want ideally widespread destruction instead of disorienting display.
What now?
So for the large cluster jewels, you want a 3-noder, preferably prismatic heart, blanketed snow, and widespread destruction if you want to save that extra skill point and put it elsewhere on the tree. I think disorienting display is okay because it gives you a blind for nearby enemies if you use an elemental skill. When I'm mapping, I tend to use Vortex quite a bit, so this kind of just helps us survive a little bit better. It's not very consistent, so I wouldn't say it's too important. But definitely getting these two mods on your large clusters is important, and getting an 8-noder will really save you some necessary points. As far as medium clusters go, I have 3 crit ones, Basics of Pain, and Pressure Points. Uh, this is kind of where I cap a lot of my crit chance. It's just cheaper, I found, to do it here than elsewhere. So, yeah. And then the one other medium I'm running is Evil Eye, Eye to Eye, and Repeater. It's really just for more damage, if anything. Projectile damage for our Ice Spear. The small clusters is just double crit multi and whatever else I could get. Ideally, I would want triple crit multi and ES on these, but each one of those is like 20x, so we're making baby steps towards that. I am running Thread of Hope in this area. It's pretty common for things like Int Wander or just any crit Occultist build using power charges. It's really strong because you can hit some of the ES nodes, and definitely this is my next pickup. But yeah, I'd say it's definitely worth getting one, especially if you only lose like 10% res from it. A necessary sort of unique for this build, I'd say, is Militant Faith with Dominus. It gives you some really strong scaling with power charges, which we get a lot of from the Occultist Ascendancy. And Unnatural Instinct down here, it's not really required, but it is nice for some move speed, attack speed, and some spell damage. Definitely worth the 3x that it is now. It's a lot cheaper than usual. Lastly, I have a crit chance with Hatred, Watcher's Eye, and some move speed with Grace, just quality of life. The hatred is really all you need. You can get some other stuff here that's really cool, but that's going to be expensive, so I don't really bother with it for now. And that's really it. The build is pretty functional as it
When I'm
is.
ready,
I'm definitely
and
going to
not
make some
before.
upgrades. Since the ceiling is so high, it feels pretty nice. That you can always get the damage up higher and one-shot bosses faster, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be a tanky build doing wave 30s. You're really just looking at a build that's just fun to play really fast and can one-shot all content besides the really juice stuff that you need to have a tank for. I'm planning on making a full, cracked out showcase with as hard content as I can possibly do. In the future when this build is a bit more loaded in. But as of right now, this video has just been to showcase what I've been up to and kind of how I'm progressing the build. I'm really enjoying it. I just really think that it's going to take a bit of time to get all of the stuff for this build prepared. But it's definitely one of the builds I'm having a lot of fun with, so I'm probably not going to sell it to make another build. And I'll just craft with what I have. But yeah, till next time.